A trailblazing local businesswoman, beloved by her community.
She was effervescent. She just had a glamour about her that was just unique.
She took pride in who she was.
Savagely murdered in her own home.
This person was so enraged that they just kept stabbing and kept stabbing and kept stabbing.
She had been hit in the head to the point that it actually had changed shape. We're looking for something that's got an edge on it, but that can snap bones.
Detectives uncover a trail of secrets and lies.
He couldn't explain things, and he failed the polygraph miserably.
What kind of animal is this person?
And chase a killer that stays one step ahead of them.
They fled to another country.
Until a series of stunning revelations leaves an entire town in shock.
Everyone was a suspect, and everyone was afraid.
Here comes some guy out of the blue telling us that he's the one who committed the murder.
You would think there's just a serial killer or somebody crazy running around.
I was like, how could we have gotten this wrong?
Two hours southwest of Louisville, Kentucky, lies the quiet town of Madisonville.
Madisonville, Kentucky is a small community. It's built on coal mines and agriculture.
It's a close, tight-knit community.
There's not a lot of crime in our area.
They call themselves the best town on earth, and for the most part, they truly believe that.
On January 13th, 2003, Madisonville police receive a call from an elderly man for a wellness check on his 85-year-old fiancée, Anna Mae Branson.
Her fiance, Dr. Bob Fenneman, was afraid that she may have fallen or that she had had a stroke of some type.
He knocked on the door and couldn't get her to answer, and that's when he became worried. And he called Anna Mae's brother and the local police department.
An officer meets Anne's fiance and brother outside her house. Finding a backup key under a bush, they enter the home to look for her.
The patrol officer went in one direction. Dr. Bob Fenneman was looking around, and Earl Winstead, her brother, went down to the basement. When he got to the bottom of the basement steps, he said, "I found her." It appeared at first that she could have fallen. But then upon seeing all the injuries to her body, it was obvious that Miss Branson had been murdered.
Homicide investigators are called to the scene and are shocked when they arrive.
Miss Ann was a friend of my mother's, and it was quite devastating. She was on her stomach. Her legs were extended. She had many, many stab wounds to her back.
She had been hit in the head to the point that it actually had changed shape.
Looking at the body, detectives start building a theory of what happened.
She had defensive wounds on her forearms, then she was knocked down. That's when the perpetrator really went to work.
Her head was facing the small chest type freezer. There was actually two types of blood spatter on the freezer next to her head. One was like a striking motion, and one was a golf type swing, where the spin-off from the blood spatter actually landed on that.
I can remember thinking that the perpetrator must have used two different weapons. The weapon was not only going through flesh and organs, going through bones, and was coming out on the floor underneath her. It was unlike anything that we'd ever seen or heard of before.
Why was this defenseless woman attacked so viciously? Detectives continue their search for evidence.
At the time, we didn't see anything stolen.
All of her large carat jewelry were on her finger and had not been touched.
The amount of damage she sustained suggests that the attacker was emotionally attached to her.
You think about someone leaving the area, dripping blood from, their arms, and not to find any blood on the door frames, handrails. It was surmisable that person had taken the time to clean up the crime scene.
But other than the evidence on the freezer and the amount of damage that she had sustained, there was no other real clues.
News of Ann's death spreads quickly in the small town.
I got the call that Ann had been murdered. And not just murdered, but unbelievably, brutally murdered. It's just something that you see on the news, but it's not real until it happens in your family.
I just felt like a ton of bricks had fallen on me. Having someone who was a second mother to me killed in such a horrible way is just overwhelmingly devastating.
Anna Mae Winstead was born in Madisonville on November 30th, 1917. And from the beginning, she stood out from the crowd.
Ann was effervescent. She just had a confidence about her, a glamour about her that was just unique.
Anna Mae was a very flamboyant lady. She had a zest for life.
In 1935, Ann married her high school sweetheart, Carol Branson.
When Anna Mae and Carol were first married, they were poor. During World War II, Anna Mae was a Rosie the Riveter, working on fighter planes.
But that was just the start for her. After that, she liked business, and she stayed in the business world.
In 1950, the hardworking couple used their savings to buy a Dairy Queen franchise.
The center of the town was the Dairy Queen, and everyone went there for date night.
Miss Ann, as a boss, was a demanding person, but she also made you feel like you were part of the family there.
They literally became multimillionaires through this Dairy Queen.
When Ann's husband, Carol, died in 1994, Ann was ready to take on a new business challenge.
She would get these older houses, and then she would make them fabulous, and then she would rent them.
Anna Mae was one of the most successful business people that I've ever known, even in her older age.
Ann was generous with her renters, and she was generous with her family. And everyone knew that they could borrow money from Ann, but they would have to pay it back.
Anna Mae was so much of a businesswoman that she kept a ledger with information about people that owed her money.
In her later years, family and business weren't the only things in Ann's life. Several months before her death, Ann had met retired eye surgeon Dr. Bob Fenneman.
Dr. Bob lived in Evansville, Indiana, about 50 miles from Madisonville. When she and Dr. Bob first started dating, she said, "Well, I've got a boyfriend." The very last thing that Anna Mae acted like was an old lady. When I found out that she was murdered, that just totally shocked me.
At the crime scene, detectives examined the rest of the house for clues.
There were no signs of forced entry into her residence.
Nothing was ransacked, like somebody was searching for something. We didn't have any idea who would have committed such a violent act on an 85-year-old woman.
What kind of animal is this person?
While forensics continue their work, detectives speak to the two men who alerted police, her fiancé Bob and her brother Earl.
Earl was asked to establish a timeline for that Sunday, and he had provided an alibi where he was with family at the time of the murder, and the family did substantiate his whereabouts.
What about Ann's fiancé? Could he have had a reason to harm her?
In a homicide of this magnitude, you need to ask who's in a relationship with this victim. When we interviewed Dr. Bob Fenneman, he was emotionally distraught.
Dr. Bob did ask Ann to marry him. She did accept his 3-carat diamond ring, but she had not set a date. They had talked about whether they would have some sort of agreement because she did have a lot of money, but she was kind of hesitant.
Police want to know, had Ann's hesitancy about Bob caused him to turn against her in a violent rage?
This person was so enraged that they just kept stabbing and kept stabbing and kept stabbing. To inflict that many injuries, this was a personal crime.
Coming up, Buried secrets are brought to light.
We all thought he was a family man, thought he was a churchgoer.
She explained that her alibi had been coerced.
While detectives unearth suspects with violent pasts.
He had several assaults in his past.
We're starting to think, hey, this could be our guy.
They had already stabbed another woman. We would never have dreamed who the killer was.
Detectives are investigating the horrific murder of elderly millionaire Ann Branson. Forensics suggests it was a crime of passion.
Dr. Bob, even with his age, we did feel could be a viable suspect.
Dr. Bob was from Evansville, and he drove all the time to Madisonville to court Ann. But she had not yet decided whether she was going to get married.
Had Ann's reluctance turned Bob against her?
Dr. Bob Fenneman was asked to establish a timeline and provide us with an alibi.
The day before Miss Branson was murdered, she had gone to Evansville, Indiana, to meet up with Dr. Fenneman to go to a dance. And after the dance, Miss Branson returned to Madisonville.
Sunday, he said he attempted to call her and she didn't answer the phone.
It was shortly before 10 o'clock that evening, and Dr. Fenneman said that he presumed that she had gone out or that she had gone to bed early.
So the next day, he said he became worried, and he said that's when they discovered the body at the bottom of the staircase.
Detectives learned from speaking to her family that Ann had been to an evening church service on Sunday.
Miss Branson's estimated time of death was on that Sunday evening after she returned home from church. Dr. Bob said that he was at home in Evansville, Indiana.
Taking no chances, investigators search his phone records.
Phone calls placed Dr. Bob in Evansville, Indiana, so he would not have been in the area during the time frame of the murder. He did not have the opportunity to murder her. It just wasn't feasible for him to have committed the crime.
After clearing Bob as a suspect, they ask if he can think of anyone who would harm his fiancée.
Dr. Bob recalled that her handyman, Wayne Shelton, had borrowed money from Miss Ann in the past, and the amount was more than what a handyman should be borrowing from his employer. Mr. Shelton also owed child support. He was trying to provide the court system a statement that she would guarantee his employment, and Miss Branson did not feel that she could guarantee him employment. So she had concerns over it.
The fact that the maintenance man had a financial relationship with the victim made him a person of interest that we wanted to talk to.
Detectives contact Wayne Shelton and ask him to meet them at Ann's house.
Wayne Shelton came to the crime scene when we were there, and I explained to him the circumstances of what had occurred. He was extremely shaken. He was in disbelief.
Police cut to the chase and ask Wayne where he was on the night Ann was murdered.
His alibi was he was in another county visiting with his daughter during the murder of Ann Branson.
Knowing Wayne's alibi is weak, detectives take him to the station for a polygraph. But there's just one problem.
Wayne Shelton had a heart condition. It was so fragile that it kept him from even being able to take a polygraph.
So the polygraph examiner refused to give Mr. Shelton a polygraph.
Frustrated by this setback, Ann's nephew, Jack Branson, a retired FBI officer, pulls some strings.
Mary and I hired a retired FBI polygrapher, and Wayne Shelton said, yes, I'll be polygraphed.
Jack's polygrapher takes Wayne Shelton carefully through the test questions.
Wayne Shelton passed the polygraph with flying colors. So at that point, we were able to say, okay, he passed the polygraph. He did not do it.
As investigators search for new suspects, news of the savage murder puts the whole town on edge.
This had been a little town where literally people didn't lock their doors. And all of a sudden, everyone was a suspect and everyone was afraid.
The community needed to know if they had something to fear. So it was pressure all the way around to get this crime solved.
As word spreads, police begin to receive tips from the public.
We received a tip that there was a black pickup truck at the residence after 12 at night.
Could the black truck belong to the killer? Investigators ask Ann's family if they know anyone who drives such a vehicle.
We kept hearing about a crazy tenant that drove a black truck.
What detectives learn about Ann's tenant concerns them.
Robert Prince had characteristics of a mentally unstable person.
He would actually call her in the middle of the night and say that he had ghosts up in his attic, and would she please get rid of the ghosts?
Ann always said she was nervous around him, and she didn't like it when he came to the house, and he called her at all hours of the day and night.
Miss Branson had received several complaints from the neighbors asking that she evict Mr. Prince from his apartment, and she didn't want to move him from that location.
The family would say, don't become so involved with him.
Had Ann's attempt to move Robert prompted him to attack her?
If Robert Prince was mentally unstable and became angry at her, could he have caused her death?
Detectives investigating the slaughter of Ann Branson have discovered she had been involved in a dispute with a volatile tenant.
Robert Prince would call Mrs. Branson at all hours, saying crazy things to her, wanting her to come over. They had warned her not to go over there by herself.
Due to his mental instability, he did pose a great concern for us to investigate.
Searching their database, detectives find alarming information about their new suspect.
Robert Prince was found to have had a violent criminal history. He had several assaults in his past, and he could express a lot of anger towards someone else.
Police obtain a warrant to search his home.
What we were looking for is the murder weapon. I'm looking for something that's got an edge on it, but that can snap bones and go completely through the victim's body. And I'm looking for any clothes. There's no way that the perpetrator did this without getting some of the blood on himself. But we weren't able to locate any of the items that would be of interest to us in this case.
Despite the lack of physical evidence, detectives bring Robert Prince into the station for questioning.
When he was taken from his residence and interrogated, he did not want to answer any questions to do with his prior criminal history. And upon initial confrontation with Robert Prince, he was extremely agitated.
As he starts talking, we're picking up on his violent tendencies. We're starting to think, hey, this could be our guy.
Detectives note that Robert's right arm is injured.
Even though he's a man that could inflict this kind of punishment, he can't bend his right arm. And we asked him, so you right-handed or left-handed? He said, I'm right-handed.
Detectives wonder, could Robert have hurt his arm attacking Ann?
He said he was in another state at the estimated time of death for Miss Branson.
Robert Prince gave the alibi that he was with some family in Tennessee and that he had stopped in a convenience store and got some gas and got a soda or something.
With nothing concrete linking Robert to the homicide, police have to let him go, and detectives get to work checking his alibi.
We contact that convenience store, pull surveillance video, and lo and behold, there's Robert Prince on camera.
And in addition to that, prior to Miss Branson's murder, Robert Prince had surgery to his elbow area and his arm, and according to his doctor, if he had inflicted those injuries upon Miss Branson, then all of his staples and his stitches in his arm would no longer be intact. So The alibi and surgical area just ruled him out as a suspect.
Back at square one, detectives are relying on the autopsy to break open new leads.
The autopsy revealed that Mrs. Branson was stabbed about 97 times throughout her body. Her skull was pulverized. She was beaten so badly that a lot of the stab wounds were actually inflicted after she had passed away.
The evidence technician said that we're not talking about just a regular old steak knife. That's something that's very heavy because the blade is going through her bones, through her organs, and was coming out on the other side.
While the autopsy fails to identify an actual murder weapon, it gives a clear estimate of Ann's time of death.
There was a pot on the stove, which she had baked her supper. She had eaten. We were able to analyze the food in her stomach. And based on the absorption rate principle, the time of death for her was approximately 30 minutes after she got home from church.
It was determined that her time of death was between 7 and 7:30 p.m.
As police continue their search for the killer, Ann's family struggles with her death.
Mary and I walked over to Earl's house to see how he was dealing with the grief. And his son, Russell, took us in to see Earl.
The whole family was in shock, and everyone was just questioning who could have possibly done this.
Earl and Russell, they were both saying, we'll be glad when we found out who did this. And we understood that was exactly how we were feeling.
As the family grieves, Madisonville residents question whether their town really is the best town on earth.
When the town found out that Miss Branson had been murdered, it scared a lot of people because you would think there's just a serial killer or somebody crazy running around to have done that.
This is Madisonville, Kentucky, coined best town on earth. You cannot have an unsolved murder of one of its most prominent members. It can't happen.
As detectives contemplate their next move, an unexpected tip sends the case in a new direction.
We're day 4 or 5 into this investigation, but we have nothing strong yet. And then we get a phone call.
That was the pivotal turning point.
The caller is a local mine worker named Jeff Hibbs.
Jeff Hibbs has some information about one of Anna Mae's nephews, Russell Winstead.
That phone call basically shocked and rocked our investigation.
5 days after the bloody murder of 85-year-old Ann Branson, police are contacted by a man named Jeff Hibbs, who makes a stunning allegation.
Jeff Hibbs believed that Russell Winstead had some involvement with the murder of his aunt, Anna Mae Branson.
Russell Winstead was known as a coal miner, a hard worker. He had 3 sons. He was married to Terry Winstead. It was known that he and his family attended church regularly.
Jeff claims that Russell has a secret unknown to his family.
Jeff Hibbs told us that Russell Winstead had an extreme gambling addiction.
He also tells detectives that he'd gone gambling with Russell a few nights before Ann's murder.
Russell told Jeff he had gotten a loan from his aunt that he had to repay by Monday morning, and that he had $9,700, and he lost every single penny of that money.
Russell told Jeff that they're all going to know about his gambling addiction because his aunt is going to expose him for borrowing money from her on a regular basis and not paying it back.
Jeff tells police that on Monday, the local headlines grabbed his attention.
Jeff Hibbs reads about this old lady that got murdered in Madisonville.
And he was like, oh my gosh, this is the aunt that Russell had to repay by the first of the week.
Detectives go back to Ann's house to search for evidence.
On our second search, I found a ledger and the large amount of loans that was written down for one nephew. They totaled up almost $100,000. The day before her murder, she had actually written down that he had received $9,700 from her and that he had paid her a check for $12,000.
Detectives believe that Russell had given Ann a check in hopes of winning enough at the casino to cover it. But when the check is nowhere to be found, detectives subpoena his bank records.
Upon the financial investigation, it was determined that Russell was basically shifting money around to cover the loans from his aunt. And the missing check for the $12,000 never cleared the bank.
10 days after the homicide, detectives interview Russell Winstead.
Even when we told him that Miss Branson had put it in her ledger, Russell still denied any knowledge of that check. He denied having any involvement in this whatsoever. At the time of death, Russell explained that he had gone to church and that upon leaving church, he had dropped his children off at his ex-wife's house, and then that he was at home in the basement.
Russell said he got home about 7:25 p.m.
With Ann's time of death estimated between 7 and 7:30 p.m., detectives interview Russell's wife, Terry, to verify his alibi.
Terry's explanation for Russell was down to the minute.
She said, yeah, we went to church. We drove separate. He dropped his son off at his ex-wife's house, and then he got home 7:25.
Russell had a solid alibi. His wife told the exact same story he did as to where Russell was on the night of Mrs. Branson's death.
There's just one loose end for detectives to tie up: Russell's casino visits.
I asked, you know Russell gambles, right? She's like, yeah, I know he gambles. I was like, on a bad night, what do you think he loses? And she's like, I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000. I was like, try 38,000 on one night. And then she started bawling.
This was just devastating to her because she trusted Russell.
That same day, police get a search warrant for Russell's home.
We didn't find the murder weapon. We didn't find any clothes that were bloodstained. But we did recover a couple of burner cell phones that his wife didn't know even existed.
One of the cell phones was only used to contact a waitress at one of the casinos.
Russell had a girlfriend who worked at the casino.
So we talked to the waitress, and it alarmed us somewhat that even after he's a suspect of interest in a murder case, Russell was still continuing to go to the casino, still trying to be the high roller.
Russell has plenty of secrets, but do money problems and infidelity make him a killer?
Russell's father, Earl, told me the police are trying to jam Russell up because they need a suspect and they want to solve this case.
When we found out that Russell had been living a literal double life, we were shocked. But we felt that there was no way Russell had not done this. We believed it with all of our hearts.
But as they dig deeper into Russell's gambling, detectives find evidence of a man out of control.
We come with a total of 236 times that Russell had visited a casino in the last year, losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in that time frame.
When it's rolled up into one, you're just like going, who is this guy?
The scope of Russell's betrayal prompts his wife, Terry, to kick him out of the house and return to police with a damning admission.
Terry explained that her alibi had been coerced.
She said that Russell is the one that told her what to say.
She explained that Russell actually did not come home around 7:30 p.m., that it was more like 9. So that put him as being a person that could have committed this murder.
Investigators obtain a warrant for Russell's arrest, but when they go to bring him in, they're in for a shock.
Russell Winstead had fled the country. We were very concerned that he would not be brought to justice.
When I found out that Russell Winstead had fled, it was my goal to get him, no matter what the cost, manpower, what it took.
The prime suspect in the murder of Ann Branson is her nephew, Russell Winstead. But before investigators can make an arrest, Russell goes on the run.
For Russell to have fled the country, it was shocking to all of us.
An innocent man doesn't flee like that. This is the last straw, and he has to come back.
I have never been a person that takes waiting very well, and our son came up with the idea of putting this case on America's Most Wanted.
If you've seen Russell Winstead, please call our hotline tonight, 1-800-CRIME-TV.
They aired the show February of '05, and then in May of '05, Russell was spotted at a casino in Costa Rica.
He was living under a pseudonym. He was still bouncing from female to female, and he was living the lifestyle that he attempted to live here.
We knew where he was. We wanted justice.
There's just one problem. With Russell facing a potential death sentence at home, Costa Rican authorities refuse to hand him over.
Costa Rica will not extradite anyone to the United States where the death sentence is a possibility. And also, they have gambling. So Russell had done his homework big time.
While investigators strategize how to get Russell back to Kentucky, they make a troubling discovery.
We found out that Russell's father, Earl, had been providing Russell with monies for his lifestyle in Costa Rica.
We had a guy come forward that said that Earl was actually paying him to wire money via Western Union to Russell in Costa Rica. We believed Earl was actually aiding and abetting Russell's flight.
With Earl sending his son proceeds from the estate of the person he murdered, it basically rubbed salt in the wound. It turned your stomach.
Investigators set up a sting to catch Earl red-handed.
So we wired this guy up as a confidential informant, and he met Earl, wired the money, and we got Earl doing that 2 or 3 times.
It was verified that Earl was sending money to Russell in Costa Rica.
While investigators find no evidence that Earl was involved in his sister Ann's murder, they arrest him for helping his son evade justice.
It really struck all of us by surprise. The thought that Russell Winstead's father, Earl Winstead, was sending money down to live on in Costa Rica just sat like a burr under a saddle with me.
I remember Earl being led out in handcuffs because he was arrested for helping a fugitive. But what really hurt us deeply was the fact that we knew it was Ann's money that was paying for her murderer.
Earl eventually pleads guilty to 7 counts of hindering apprehension.
He was placed on probation for 2 years, and if he contacted Russell at any point during those 2 years, then he would have to serve jail time.
While Earl faces legal trouble at home, federal authorities move in on Russell in Costa Rica.
Russell was observed at the gambling casinos. They felt that that was probably the safest place for them to take him into custody. So as Russell was leaving the gambling casino in Costa Rica, he was apprehended.
He was arrested in May of 2005 in Costa Rica. We did not get him back to Kentucky until February of the following year. Extraditing someone back from another country takes a lot of time, and federal authorities had to make assurances that we would not seek the death penalty against Russell.
It took us 7 months to extradite him back to the United States.
To know that it was taking this long was very hard. In fact, every time we'd visit a cemetery where Emma's buried, I'd say, we're gonna get him. We're gonna get him. That was a long, slow process.
Finally, more than 3 years after Ann's murder, Russell Winstead is returned home to face trial for the murder of his aunt.
That day, I'll never forget. I went back to Anna Mae's grave and said, we got him. And I felt like a burden had been lifted because we knew what justice was going to be done.
Upon Russell's return to Kentucky, we were preparing for a trial when we got another humongous bombshell as far as our investigation is concerned.
Someone who was also charged with murder of an elderly lady came forward saying that he was the one who had killed Mrs. Branson.
All of this evidence has been stacking up against Russell Winstead. And here comes some guy out of the blue telling us that he's the one who committed the murder.
The confession is contained in a letter posted from Hopkins County Jail by an accused murderer named Fred Roulette.
Fred Roulette basically gives detailed information on the murder of Ann Branson that was never publicly made known. He stated that the murder weapon was a Bradis hammer. It is a mining tool, and he advised that he had modified that.
Fred Roulette provided a drawing of Mrs. Branson's home, and it was eerily accurate.
He gives all of these details that only the killer would know. I was like, how could we have gotten this wrong?
Police have arrested Russell Winstead for the brutal murder of his aunt, Ann Branson. But now accused murderer Fred Roulette has confessed to the crime, leaving investigators reeling.
Fred Roulette was also charged with murdering an elderly lady. So you think, oh my gosh, did we get it wrong?
It was completely devastating. So we were determined we were going to find out the circumstances of his confession.
Investigators throw all their resources into checking the validity of Fred's confession.
Fred was a drug addict, and he could not provide the details of the murder and robbery that he himself had committed to the level of detail that he provided about Mrs. Branson's case.
When investigators check the jail records, they discover a telling detail.
Fred did not come forward until after Russell had been extradited back to Kentucky, and Fred Roulette and Russell Winstead were cellmates.
Already facing 25 years on a separate murder charge, Fred Roulette insists to detectives that he killed Ann Branson.
Fred didn't realize until we told him that if he wanted to confess to this murder, it now packed a death penalty. After Fred heard those words, he was like, oh, no, game's off, gig's up.
That's when he told investigators that he had all the intimate details of the murder from Russell Winstead. Fred Roulette was promised that his family would receive compensation. Since he was going to be in prison for the additional murder, so Fred Roulette agreed to take the false confession.
With Russell's deception exposed, his trial can proceed. In July 2007, 4 years after Ann's murder, a jury hears what really happened on that Sunday night in January 2003.
Mrs. Branson had loaned Russell upwards of $100,000. And Mrs. Branson notated in that ledger was that she had received that $12,000 check from Russell on Saturday as partial repayment of the loan. Russell had a large sum of money that he lost in the casino, and he made mention that he needed to pay back to his aunt on Monday. Russell knew he could not make good on that $12,000 check.
I believe that Russell Winstead was so desperate that he went over and he attempted to talk Miss Ann into tearing up the $12,000 check. When that didn't work, I believe that he lost it and that he snapped.
And that's when she started receiving all the damage to the 65 plus stab wounds to her back. We still do not know to this day how many times Anna Mae Branson was hit in the head.
He cleaned up the crime scene, and he felt that he could get away with murder.
Russell Winstead is convicted of murder and first-degree robbery. He is sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 25 years.
We all thought he was a family man, thought he was a churchgoer, but he was leading a secret life when he was off work. Gambling. Hid it from the family, hid it from his wife.
We would never have dreamed who the killer was. Of all the people that we could have looked around in a crowded room and said, that's the person, it would not have been the person that ended up being the killer.
When they announced the verdict, relief washed over me like Niagara Falls, a relief that this jury saw through Russell Winstead, and he did not fool them.
Finally, Miss Ann got her justice, and everybody who loved and knew her got a form of justice.
I miss Ann every day. And
could set him free. Did the evidence of a brutal strangling put him away?
Was knotted very tightly around her neck.
Or was it a hell-bent detective honing in on an easy target?
You said you didn't see a car, you never heard a car, you never touched a car. Lo and behold, guess whose DNA is inside a dead girl's car?
Tonight, one woman's crusade to prove his innocence.
People just lost track of who was doing what.
Lost track in a high-profile murder case?
We're showing you the crime scene.
At the water's edge fishing, there's no way I could even lean out and see that there's anything going on.
Tapes the jury never saw. Even the judge now rethinking the case.
What do you think after watching that videotape?
It does make me question whether or not Mark Carver did it.
Did they catch a murderer or make one?
If Mark Carver didn't kill Ira Yarmolenko, then who did?
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Vargas.
And I'm David Muir. As we come on the air here tonight, a man sits in a North Carolina prison nearly 6 years into a life sentence for killing this young woman right here behind us tonight. But just like that hit documentary series, Making a Murderer, questions are now being raised. Is an innocent man behind bars?
Just yesterday, Mark Carver's lawyer filed a motion to have his conviction overturned, to start fresh with a new trial. I've now spent hours with that man at the center who refused a plea deal, saying he wouldn't confess to something he didn't do. After tonight, will you think he did it?
Drive west from Charlotte, North Carolina on Interstate 85, and you'll cross the Catawba River. Wide and placid, it's a big draw for recreational boaters and sportsmen. In close but separate locations on the river's wooded banks, two people arrive here on the morning of May 5th, 2008. They could not be more different. One is a 20-year-old student from nearby UNC Charlotte, Ira Yarmolenko, a musician, a photographer, a poet.
We as women, as children.
An outdoorsy type who loves nature.
Ooh. She really enjoyed the beauty of nature. She tried to find it everywhere.
Pavel is Ira's brother.
Why do you think your sister drove to the river that day?
I think that she was looking for a pretty spot to take pictures at.
Ira is originally from the Ukraine, immigrating here with her family when she was just 7 years old. The other person on the river that day, 39-year-old Mark Carver. He's from just down the road in nearby Gastonia, a dirt road which bears his family name, lined with modest dwellings which house his relatives.
Carver was a very simple person. His family lived out in the country, didn't have much education, could not read very well, cannot write very well.
Unlike Ira, Mark has never been to college. In fact, he's never gone to high school. After years of working in the local cotton mills, he now spends his day here at this fishing hole on the Catawba, where he casts away his troubles, often with this man, his cousin, Neil Cassida. Robin Carver is Mark's sister-in-law.
Oh, they were together all the time when they were fishing and stuff.
What happened on that river that bright May day is as perplexing as it was violent, serving a life sentence for her murder. I recently went behind the barbed wire and concrete walls to hear his story.
Hi, Mark.
Hey.
I'm Elizabeth.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
Why don't you have a seat?
Okay.
How long have you been in this prison, Mark?
5 years.
There is no question that what happened to Ira that day was terrible and tragic. But attorney Chris Muma, who's devoted her career to exonerating the wrongfully convicted, says Carver is also a victim.
We think Mark is innocent. And if Mark is innocent, the family has not received justice, and the true perpetrator is still out on the streets.
Muma took me out on the river to the spot where Carver and Cassida were fishing that morning.
Mark would back his truck up to down this road?
Down here.
So he didn't walk the road, he drove down.
He drove down.
And literally parked with the back of the truck right here.
He would sit on the back, the tailgate, and fish.
Cassida left around 12:30 that afternoon, leaving Carver alone. Half an hour later, two jet skiers out for a ride on the Catawba come upon a gruesome scene.
Yes, County 911. I'm a boater on the Catawba River, above the I-85 bridge.
Something blue and metallic catches
Body, her car, found 100 yards upriver from Carver's fishing hole.
The police found Ira's body right beside the driver's side of the car.
Elizabeth Leland has written extensively about the case for the Charlotte Observer. She says the bizarre crime scene posed far more questions than answers.
She wasn't raped. She wasn't robbed. There were lots of things that just didn't make sense about this case.
Among them, the odd manner of death. These 3 ligatures around her neck.
There was the very dainty little blue ribbon.
A disturbing discovery in the Catawba River, a body.
As the media descends, police begin canvassing the area for witnesses. They talk to those 2 jet skiers and to construction workers who were in the area where Ira's body was found.
We went to see if anything could be done, but it was too late. There was no movement.
And of course, they find that fisherman calmly casting for carp just downstream, Mark Carver.
And what did they tell you was happening?
They didn't tell me nothing. They just said they need to get my name and address and my fishing license. I give them to them. And then he gave them back. I shook his hand. They went up through there.
Carver is cooperative, but not very helpful. He says he neither saw nor heard anything. So police have nothing but bad news to deliver when they notify Ira's family.
A police officer came to the door.
What did he say?
He slowly walked in and told us that unfortunately they have found my sister's body and that they're very certain that it's her.
I can't fathom getting news like that.
I think all of us simply collapsed where we were, and that was it.
Days pass with no arrest. The mystery now as deep as the sorrow.
I hope that when you go home tonight, you will tell everybody that you love them. You will tell everyone that you know that you love them.
Pavel eulogizes his sister at a memorial service on campus. In the coming days, she is laid to rest, while detectives speak to those who last saw her, piecing together her final steps.
This video is to represent the timeline for Miss Irina Yarmolenko.
Detectives record this timeline video.
Ira spent the morning running errands. She went to the credit union, then she went to the Goodwill.
A security camera catches her donating several bags of clothing.
And then she went to Jackson's Java, which was a coffee shop where she worked.
It takes approximately 5 minutes and 50 seconds to drive to Jackson's Java from Goodwill.
And from there to the Catawba River is about a 19-minute drive.
This is the last documented moment of Ira's life, a grainy video of her car driving through the parking lot of a YMCA, about half a mile from the embankment where her car was found. Police study it, searching for any sign of another person with her. But the video is so unclear, police can't tell. So they pursue the theory that Ira must have met her killer out on the river.
If someone approached her that she didn't know, would she have had her defenses up?
Unfortunately for her, I think she was much more of an outgoing type of person.
The kind of person who would trust people she didn't know?
I think so, yeah.
With the search for the killer dragging on for weeks and then months, public pressure on the police to solve the crime mounts.
We were tormented by this search. We thought of it more or less constantly.
So police bring Mark Carver back in and start to do some fishing of their own.
Do you know what DNA is?
Are they about to find a murderer or make one?
Everybody was just in shock. We just couldn't believe it was happening.
Stay with us.
#2020 continues.
I'll need you to put on these gloves before going through the evidence.
On the ground floor of the Gaston County Courthouse, we find this cardboard box. Inside, the evidence from the Ira Yarmolenko crime scene, the 3 ligatures that were wrapped around her neck, a small floral bag from which one of those ligatures, a blue ribbon, had been torn.
Look at how tight that knot is.
Crime scene photos of her car on the banks of the river, all pieces of a Rubik's Cube of a case. Investigators spend 6 months working every possible lead and interviewing cooperative witnesses like Mark Carver repeatedly.
Did you see that little girl?
I told him I didn't know what happened to the girl, but I went up there and helped her.
Carver and his cousin Neil Cassida both volunteered DNA samples. Meanwhile, Ira's family works the media, keeping images of the smiling student, the carefree spirit that was Ira, alive in the public's mind.
We simply did the only thing we could do, contact local media and get information out there so that possible witnesses would submit information.
Pavel, a brother who won't quit, at one point appeals directly to the killer.
I have no doubt that once you truly realize how deeply you've hurt us all, you'll have no choice but to surrender.
It is not until 7 months after the murder that investigators finally catch a break. They have a DNA match. Traces of Mark Carver's DNA in one spot on the outside of the car, above the rear driver's side door. Neil Cassida's DNA is in 2 spots, on the inside of the right passenger window and on an armrest.
What kind of DNA are we talking about?
It's DNA where skin cells have been shed, and typically it's called touch DNA.
It is not blood DNA or semen, but police think it's enough, even though the 2 cousins had no obvious motive for murder.
The question that the DNA never answered and the police never could was why these men would kill Ira Yarmolenko.
Groping for answers, police come up with a theory that Ira had somehow seen Carver and Cassida doing something so outrageous they had to kill her to keep their secret.
Their theory was that Ira was down there to photograph and caught the men doing something that they didn't want anybody to know about. And so that the men violently strangled her and pushed the car down the embankment, and that's why their DNA was found on it.
So now Mark Carver finds himself on the hot seat.
Do you know what DNA is? I found your DNA inside her car. I can explain it. Now, you didn't find mine. Oh, yeah, I did. I did. I'm yours and Neil's buddy.
My DNA ain't in that car.
How much money do you want?
I bet you $1 million. My DNA ain't in that car. I didn't know that car was even up there.
Hey, bye.
I can't help it, but I didn't do it.
You said you didn't see a car, you never heard a car, you never touched a car. Lo and behold, guess whose DNA is inside a dead girl's car? Yours.
Over and over again, you keep telling the police, we didn't touch the car.
I told them, but they didn't believe nothing we told them.
In fact, during that hour-long interrogation, Carver denies seeing Ira or touching her car more than 50 times.
I'm telling the truth.
When the interview finally wraps up, police allow Carver and his cousin Neil Cassida to go home. But Neil's daughter Amy says the writing was on the wall.
He walked in and he was like, they're trying to pin this on me.
Did he tell you what they said to him?
Well, they were saying that that they knew he did it. He just needed to confess it.
2 days later, before sunrise, police show up to arrest the men. They haul them back in and give them one last chance to confess.
All right, Neil, we got a few procedural things to do real quick.
This is Neil Cassida.
Y'all parking the wrong tree. I swear my mom was very, but I didn't have a thing to do with it.
No confession, no matter.
Police charge Mark Carver and Neil Cassida with her murder.
The two men are charged with first-degree murder, even though Neil Cassida had already passed a polygraph. The men appear stunned and confused at their arraignment the following day.
Like, everybody was just in shock. We just couldn't believe it was happening.
We do not want to go to trial until we have all the evidence.
The man leading the charge against Carver and Cassida is Gaston County District Attorney Locke Bell. But it is a slow charge, even after the men make bail.
Neil Cassida's family greeted him inside the Gaston County Jail tonight.
No comment, please.
Police continue to test and eliminate 8 other suspects. 2 years pass before prosecutors bring the case to trial. Then, on the eve of the opening arguments in Neil Cassida's case, a shocking development.
It was Sunday morning. The trial started on Monday. He was in the kitchen, and he told my mom I'm having a little trouble breathing, and he just fell over.
Neil Cassida never gets his day in court.
Neil Cassida died in his Mount Holly home Sunday morning.
Those 2 years was very hard on him. He was so worried that he was going to prison for something he didn't do.
Even with one of the defendants dead, the state pushes forward with the prosecution of the other, Mark Carver, who at the time hires local defense attorney Brent Ratchford. Before the trial, Carver is offered the deal of a lifetime, plead guilty to second-degree murder, and spend just 4 to 8 years in prison. Ratchford thought the deal was a strong statement about the state's weak case.
I'd never gotten such a low offer. He turned it down without batting an eye.
I'm not going to plead guilty for something I didn't do.
You'd rather spend the rest of your life in prison?
Yeah.
Mark Carver walked calmly into court.
In March 2011, Carver's legal reckoning finally arrives.
He's upbeat and feeling good. He's innocent, so we're ready for our day.
At trial, prosecutors build their case on 3 key pieces of evidence. The first, Carver's proximity to the crime scene. If he were less than 100 yards from where Ira was killed, prosecutors argue his claim that he heard nothing that day can't be true. Detectives testify about an experiment they conducted on the river. One detective stood where Carver was fishing, another where Ira was. According to testimony, they spoke in normal voices and could hear each other.
We had a lot of issue with that, but it was allowed to come in anyway.
The second piece of evidence is that touch DNA found on Ira's car that matched Mark Carver. Prosecutors say it proves he touched the car and therefore must have been at the crime scene. And to drive that point home, the state has an ace in the hole. A moment from that interrogation where Carver, police testify, gave himself away.
I believe the words he used was a little thing or a little...
Detective William Terry was also in the room during that interrogation.
He said that she came up to him about right here.
The gotcha moment was when the police detective was recounting the interrogation and said that Mark Carver knew that Ira was little.
That moment is crucial. Carver had always said he had never seen Ira, so prosecutors ask how could he know how tall she was unless he was lying.
The very first thing I thought of was, they got you.
Judge Timothy Kincaid presided over Carver's murder trial.
That's what did it for you?
That was the turning point of that trial for me.
And with that, the prosecution rested its case.
Everyone was then sort of on the edge of their chairs waiting for the defense to present a case.
But to the shock of Carver's family, Ratchford decides the state's case is so weak, he will present no witnesses or evidence for the defense.
They could not explain how the crime occurred. Based on that, the jury's not going to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt.
They told us no way that they were going to be convicted.
They're wrong. It takes the jury just a few hours to return with a verdict, guilty of first-degree murder.
When I heard that verdict come down, I couldn't breathe. I was like, oh my God, they got it wrong.
Judge Kincaid sentences Carver to life in prison, but while his cell door slams shut, another investigation is just beginning.
So let's send you over to where Ira was.
How much of the state's case really holds water?
Tell her to yell.
Stay with us.
Gregory F. Taylor is innocent.
Chris Muma gets people out of prison.
Amen.
Her organization, the North Carolina Center on Actual Innocence, has had a hand in overturning 19 convictions.
The point at which I really thought maybe there was something to this case was finding out that Chris Muma was involved.
And I thank you so much.
Muma takes on only 2% of the clients who approach her. In 2013, she agreed to make Mark Carver's fight her own.
You rarely take these. You picked Mark's case. Why?
The bottom line is there a valid question mark, and is there a way to get the answer? Mark's case met all the criteria for us.
And if anyone ever needed a sharp legal mind in his corner, it is Mark Carver. Muma argues he was easily manipulated by police because of his limited education.
Is it hard for you to read and write?
Yeah. I can read a little bit, but I can't write. I'm literate.
You really have to go all the way up the hill.
One of the first problems Muma noticed in the case was that the killers were, she believes, physically incapable of killing.
There's all kinds of things that don't fit together. It doesn't fit together that two men who are so limited in their physical ability could do this to a young, vibrant, strong girl.
Neil had a terrible heart condition. His family said he couldn't walk 20 feet without becoming winded. Mark Carver has carpal tunnel in his hands. He says he can't even hold a plate for long without dropping it.
Those years working in a cotton mill had left Carver disabled. He showed us the scars on his arms from multiple surgeries.
So how does that affect what you can do and what you can't do?
I can't grab nothing, hold it for a long time.
Can you button your cuff back up?
Yeah, just take me a minute. I'll get it in a minute. Just have to give me time.
Okay.
Could these hands throttle someone to death? And even if Carver had killed Ira for reasons unknown, why on earth would he stay at the scene?
It doesn't make sense. Who's going to kill someone and then go right back to fishing?
Muma also points to this man who asked us not to reveal his identity. He was on the Catawba River that day and even spoke to Mark Carver around 2 p.m. in that crucial period after Ira was killed and before police questioned Mark Carver.
We talked about fishing and talked about his family. We had a good conversation for about 30, 35 minutes.
But most importantly, this man says he didn't notice anything about Carver that suggested he had just been through a homicidal struggle.
Mr. Carver wasn't muddy, he wasn't wet, he had no scratches on him. He was just as normal as anybody could be normal, just sitting on the back of his SUV fishing.
Muma thinks this man's testimony could have been important at Carver's trial, but he was never called to testify. Instead, the jury heard from that detective who described the sound experiment police conducted on the river, trying to disprove Carver's claim that he heard nothing. We recreated that experiment for ourselves.
So let's send you over to where Ira was.
Okay.
I'm going to stay here where Mark was.
Okay.
And we're going to have you talk.
Remember, on the stand, the detective said he spoke in a normal voice and could still be heard from the fishing hole.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I don't hear anything.
Can you hear me?
Did they do it yet?
Elizabeth, can you hear me?
Tell her to yell.
Can you hear me?
Now I hear her.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You cannot hear each other talking at a normal voice. You can't hear each other talking when you raise your voice several levels, and that's what I did with you.
You shouted as loud as you could.
I did shout as loud as I could.
Of course, the jurors never saw an experiment like this. They just heard the detective's testimony about it. And this isn't the only time Muma thinks that the detective's testimony may have misled the jury.
He said that she was, I believe the words he used was a little thing.
Remember that bombshell moment when he described how Carver seemed to know Ira's height, even though he claimed never to have seen her?
He said that she came up to him about right here.
Muma says you need to look at the actual video, which was never played in court, and understand that police were interrogating a man with an IQ of 61 and had no idea what he was up against.
If you look at the full interrogation, the detective was asking Mark to tell him about Ira.
In fact, it is the detective interrogating Mark who calls Ira little and then encourages him to describe her, even though he's already said over and over he's never seen her.
It is the detective who's telling Mark. The detective stands up and says, she would have come about here on you, right? And Mark says, yeah, I guess. And he said, well, stand up and show me.
If y'all will stand up, look at each other's eyes, but did she do look at you in the eyes? Yes, I did. Show me, stand up, show me about how tall she was on you.
And Mark basically mimics what the detective did.
Probably about right there.
Okay.
I guess. And I don't know.
Yeah, I understand.
Yes.
Okay. Was he being manipulated?
I think it was manipulative to present that at trial without clarification. And I think it was error for the defense to not challenge that.
Again, jurors in the case never saw this video. They just heard the detective describe it. Judge Timothy Kincaid, who presided over the case, also found the detective's trial testimony persuasive, but he'd never seen the tape either.
You never saw the little girl again?
This is the actual interrogation.
Never saw her call.
She was a little bit like you. I'm going to call her. She wasn't real tall. She wasn't that tall to me.
What do you think after watching that videotape of the interrogation?
I think it was quite leading.
The detective was using the language first, in other words.
He was.
Do you think that Mark Carver was being led by the detectives and is simple enough that he would just echo whatever this man was saying?
I can't answer that. I think it does put a new light on the whole thing.
What kind of light?
It does make me question whether or not Mark Carver did it. Certainly, I think that could have created reasonable doubt.
But what about that final and most damning piece of evidence, the touch DNA that seemed to place Carver at the crime scene?
When you hear the words DNA match, that sounds like as close to a sure thing as you can get.
Muma says not so fast. Whatever you think you know about the infallibility of DNA, think again.
Is there another explanation for how that DNA got there?
Stay with us.
Now 2020 continues. Once again, Elizabeth Vargas.
911, what's the emergency? They found a body floating in Catawba River.
In the hours after Ira Yarmolenko's body was found, local news crews recorded this footage of police processing the scene. It looks like they're all over it, but attorney Chris Muma says looks can be deceiving.
It was actually 2 months later before the vehicle was swabbed.
Why did the police wait 2 months before swabbing that car for DNA?
It seems from the records that people just lost track of who was doing what.
Lost track in a high-profile...
Forensic science. It was that technology that gave detectives here the break they needed. Those traces of Mark Carver's touch DNA on Ira's car.
Mark's DNA was not found on anything else. It was not found on the steering wheel, the key, the ligatures around Miss Yarmolenko's neck, her clothing, the gear shift, a seat, a front door. It was not found on any of those. And they were tested.
What about under Ira's fingernails? Was there any DNA there?
There were two profiles. There was hers, which you would expect to find there, but there also was another profile that was unidentified.
To this day, police have not been able to identify to whom that mystery DNA belongs or explain why so little of Mark Carver's or Neil Cassada's DNA was found at the crime scene.
Wouldn't his DNA have been all over Ira? We're talking about a life and death struggle here, a death match.
I would expect to see more of his DNA on her body or on her clothing.
Dr. Lawrence Kobylinski is a DNA expert who has testified in nearly 50 trials.
To be left behind. The simplest explanation is that he did not touch those ligatures.
And if it's possible that Carver didn't touch the ligatures, is it also possible he didn't actually touch the car?
Most people think of DNA only being able to be in a place if they specifically touch it, and they don't consider the fact that someone else may have had contact with them and then touched the car.
There are two ways that DNA can be deposited on an item of evidence. One way is a direct transfer, in which
As in, I touched that
as in
item.
I touch something and I leave behind DNA from my hands. The second possibility is an indirect or secondary transfer, where I shake your hand and now I touch a vehicle and I transfer your DNA onto that vehicle.
So how could Carver's DNA have been transferred? Remember, he spoke to police that day on the banks of the river.
The officer who came over and took Mark's driver's license, so he's holding an item that has Mark's DNA on it, and he shook Mark's hand.
And look again at the crime scene photos and video. Muma says it's clear some of the officers were not wearing gloves, even while they were touching the car.
They're touching the inside of the car, they're touching the outside of the car, they're touching the doors, the handles, so it's contaminated.
This officer even appears to lean on the car door. And something else is startling. While reviewing the video shot at the crime scene that day, we came across this footage. It appears to show an officer rubbing the exact area of Ira Yarmolenko's car where Mark Carver's touch DNA was found. And as you can see, he's not wearing gloves.
Were any of the officers who were touching that car, did any of them have their DNA tested?
There's no record of any DNA being taken from any officer who was at the scene.
At Carver's trial, secondary transfer of his touch DNA was dismissed as highly unlikely. But it has happened before. In 2012, a millionaire from California was murdered in his home. Forensic experts found DNA on his fingernails that they were able to link to 26-year-old Lucas Anderson. There was only one problem. Anderson had an airtight alibi. At the time of the murder, he was in the hospital being treated for severe intoxication.
It turns out the same two paramedics that scooped up Anderson, who was living on the streets, were at the murder scene a short time later.
Once prosecutors realized Anderson's DNA had been transferred to the crime scene by paramedics, he was finally cleared.
If you're not careful, you're going to end up putting somebody at a crime scene who was never there.
So why didn't Carver's original defense attorney call a DNA expert to explain how that might have happened here?
Sometimes you're opening Pandora's box. You think you're putting in a lot of good evidence, but it could turn around and bite you. Then a DNA expert is not going to help you.
Ratchford's decisions continue to haunt Mark's family.
Robin, have you spoken to Mark in prison?
We speak to him twice a week and go and visit when we can. He just wants to come home. Just imagine living every day in there knowing you didn't do it.
But if Mark Carver didn't kill Ira Yarmolenko, who did?
Did she travel from Charlotte by herself? Was someone else in the car?
An inmate wrote a letter, said that he had killed Ira Yarmolenko.
The hunt for other suspects, next. Ever since the day 20-year-old Ira Yarmolenko's bright life was cut short, Mark Carver's answers have been the same.
Mark, did you kill Ira?
No.
Did you strangle that young woman?
No. I didn't even see her.
There's some saying about how a lie has a short life, but the truth lives on forever. He's never wavered.
What does that tell you?
It tells me he's telling the truth.
And if Mark Carver is telling the truth, that means a killer is still on the loose. Someone who can solve the puzzle of that crime scene on the Catawba River. Why, for example, were there 3 ligatures around Ira's neck?
It's definitely overkill. The hoodie string was probably enough to cut off the air supply in her neck.
That alone would have killed her.
I think that.
At one point, investigators entertained the theory that Ira knew her killer. Could it have been a fellow student who may have been stalking her, or a customer from that coffee house where she worked, who some said might have been obsessed with her, or someone who coerced Ira to let them into her car that day?
The question was presented to me, did she travel from Charlotte by herself? Was there someone else in that car?
Remember, investigators were never able to enhance these surveillance images enough to confirm if Ira was alone or not.
The footage was not good enough quality where someone could tell whether there was another person in the car, either in the front seat, back seat.
Even if Ira was alone, there was no shortage of other suspects in the area who might have committed a crime of opportunity.
There were a lot of construction workers. There was a lot of traffic, a lot of people traffic. Ample opportunity for her to come in contact with someone that was totally unknown to her.
Last, but perhaps most bizarre, a confession that came early in the case.
An inmate in the Mecklenburg County Jail.
The case of a murdered UNC Charlotte student
Wrote a letter to one of our local news anchors and said that he had killed Ira Yarmolenko.
Police talked to the self-proclaimed killer, even tested his DNA, but determined his confession was just a strange way to meet a local celebrity.
And they believe that he was infatuated with the news anchor and saw this as a way of getting a chance to talk with her.
Was there any sign that he...
Chris Muma says the only way to resolve the questions surrounding Mark Carver's guilt is for the district attorney to release the DNA evidence to be re-examined.
The district attorney in this case has opposed you every step of the way.
He has. And I've asked to sit down with him. I've asked to meet.
I asked her, why should I help you to get somebody off that I firmly believe is guilty?
Prosecutors in this is happening.
There's another way to look at this. If we do believe in secondary transfer, we have to start thinking about secondary transfer of both.
But Carver is adamant his only crime is being a gullible fisherman in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Why do you think police were so focused on you?
Because they just wanted somebody to take the rap for it, and they didn't care who done it.
I think they thought they were easy targets.
Because?
They were uneducated. They wasn't highly sophisticated. They were real simple.
Poor, pretty poor.
Yeah, pretty poor.
As of tonight, there is another powerful voice suggesting Carver's case should get another look. Someone that might surprise you. The trial judge, Timothy Kincaid.
Part of a district attorney's oath is to do justice. And if that's what justice requires, that's what you got to do.
When we come back, what happened just yesterday that could set Mark Carver free? And what Ira's family has to say about it. Stay with us. It's been nearly 6 years since Mark Carver was convicted of Ira Yarmolenko's murder. His original defense attorney stands by his handling of the case, but has been haunted by it ever since.
This is the one trial in 20 years that I have lost sleep over. Mark Carver is innocent. I would love to get a second chance.
A second chance for Mark Carver. That's what Chris Muma hopes she can deliver.
Emergency.
I think we've been burgled and my wife's been attacked. Please, can you send someone quickly?
Yeah, I am.
Police have launched a murder investigation after a woman was found dead at her home in Middlesbrough.
I was absolutely terrified, thinking, what if somebody got in my house?
It felt like there was a serial killer at large and you wondered if they were going to do it again.
When a successful pharmacist is found murdered, her devastated husband goes into shock.
No, Jess, come on, baby, wake up. Baby, wake up.
And a community is torn apart.
You won't believe, obviously, what we went through and the level of betrayal there. It was a shock.
In the northeast of England lies one of Middlesbrough's most attractive areas, Linthorpe.
It's quite an affluent area, big houses, quite leafy,
long driveways, nice cars on the drive, professional people live there.
You know, it's a family area, it's very friendly. Best part about it is the neighbours, you know, we all get on, and good community. It's very safe, yeah, very safe.
In the heart of the community were a couple named Jessica and Mitesh, who owned a pharmacy in the village.
We've got a chemist here actually on our doorstep. It's a husband and wife team, so they work together. The couple are really friendly people, helpful. Whatever you need, they're always there for you to help you out. You know, any advice that you need, they're always there.
Both Jessica and Mitesh were from large Hindu families in West Yorkshire.
We grew up in a joint family, so there was 12 of us in my household.
Jessica was the first child, a happy, calm child to what I remember. She was a good child, never any bother.
Very fond memories of growing up with Jess, because we were only probably about 18 months apart in age, so quite close together. She was always fun to be around, because she was always happy no matter what, always had a smile on her face.
Jessica had big plans for her future and went to study at Manchester University.
Jessica always said that she wanted to be a pharmacist. She always wanted to help people. That was her thing.
It was at university that Jessica met Mitesh, and the pair quickly struck up a relationship together.
I think Jessica's mum was ill around the time that they got together, and Mitesh was support for Jessica and would, you know, say all the right things, buy her presents, teddy bears, things like that.
He was constantly showering her with gifts. I think she must have had like 50+ Me to You teddy bears in her collection, because we shared a room. They were like dotted all over the room. And she was just really happy. I got privy to a lot of their evening conversations at bedtime. Mitesh and Jessica would often be on the phone, and because we were sharing a room, it would be a case of her saying to him, "You put the phone down," and he'd be like, "No, you put the phone down."
They seemed just like a happy couple, well, a happy young uni couple.
Jessica's mother sadly passed away, but Mitesh helped her through this difficult time, and the couple soon mapped out their future together, despite some initial resistance.
Initially, when Jessica approached Dad about getting married, he wasn't so ecstatic about it. He didn't think they were a suitable match for Jessica, but Jessica persisted. She insisted that she loved him, and vice versa.
She wouldn't take a no. So, of course, obviously, in this day and age, we know that we can't force our child. And when she says that, "No, Dad, if I marry, it's him that I'm going to marry." But if that's the man she wants to marry, then that be it then.
In July 2009, the couple threw a big Indian wedding.
The marriage took place here in my garden. It was the first wedding within the Patel or the Hindu community that had 500 or 600 people.
Newly married, the couple set their sights on a fresh start and set up home among the village community of Linthorpe.
They got a lease on Roman Road Pharmacy and then bought a house on the avenue. A lovely big house which needed work doing, so they spent time renovating it and building up their pharmacy, you know, becoming well-known people in the community.
Having both a successful business and a new home in place, there was just one thing missing from their perfect life.
Jessica wanted to be a mother. She's always had a very motherly and a maternal instinct. Being the oldest sibling out of all 6 of us as well, she was always that much more maternal. And she wanted children of her own. I think it's something they'd thought about for years.
Apparently the couple struggled to fall pregnant, so started undergoing a course of IVF treatment, which I can only assume is a really grueling process, and that shows how much they must really wanted a child.
She expressed to me that it wasn't working naturally and that they were going to be starting IVF. All in all, Jessica went through 3 rounds of IVF that were unsuccessful. Each time She would ring me and she would say it didn't work, and she would be heartbroken that it hadn't worked. And I think the emotional distress of it all was just too much. She'd just come back off holiday and we were talking in the evening, and she was just telling me about the IVF and this 4th round. She was so happy because this round was a positive round. She said that it looks like it's going really well. They managed to freeze 3 embryos, and in June, so within a matter of weeks, she was due to have them implanted, and she was so positive they were going to work this time. The happiness was in her. I can't even describe how happy she was, because that dream of becoming a mother was just about to materialise for her.
But just weeks before Jessica's dream of motherhood could be realised, everything changed.
It's emergency.
I think we've been burgled and my wife's been attacked. I've just come home and the house is ransacked and she's just on the floor. She's got duct tape all over her and she's like unconscious.
Right, you said is your wife breathing? Can you feel a pulse?
No, I can't feel anything. Her hands are really cold. She's got like blood on her nose and stuff dripping out onto the floor. Please, can you send someone quickly?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
Okay, listen. The police are outside. Can you let the police officer in?
It's Jessica.
I'll leave her with you, okay?
Police and paramedics rush into the house and find Jessica in the living room. They try resuscitating her, but she is pronounced dead at the scene.
All we knew was that there'd been a murder. Her husband had came home from work and found her.
Has somebody broken into their home? And is it a burglary gone wrong? It was just utter shock that, you know, anything like this could have happened.
In the picturesque village of Linthorpe, the community is waking up, reeling at news of a murder. But the previous morning, May 14th, started out like any other day in the Patel household.
Jessica and Mitesh had been in the pharmacy working. Jessica's dad popped into the pharmacy to speak to them both.
I can see that smile on the day I walked in, which would have been just after 10 o'clock. And I can still see her far back because it was a sort of a deep pharmacy. So I said, I'll be down next week. And she goes, okay, Dad, I'll see you next week. Of course, I did hug her. And I couldn't believe that I would never see her again.
Mitesh worked the early shift, leaving the pharmacy to spend the afternoon at the gym.
Jessica went home, Mitesh pops back to the pharmacy, goes to the local pizza shop to pick up a pizza for the pair of them, texts his wife to say he was getting the pizza, he'd be home shortly.
He came from the chemist roughly around about 7:30. He ordered his pizza and then he left. We were quite busy at the time, so it must have been about 20 minutes, half an hour. He'd come back. I gave him his pizza. I shook his hand like normal, and he left with the pizza.
Mitesh then goes home and makes the awful discovery.
It's emergency.
I think we've been burgled and my wife's been attacked. I've just come home and the house is ransacked and she's just on the floor. She's got duct tape all over her and she's like unconscious. Her hands are really cold. Please, can you send someone quickly?
Yeah, I am.
No, Jess, come on, baby, wake up. Baby, wake up.
Cleveland police respond immediately and preserve the crime scene.
We have in the investigation what we call the golden hour. The first hour is critical because the evidence is contained in the scene and it's nearby. You seal the scene totally and nobody, absolutely nobody, including the husband, goes back indoors. Once that's happened, We'll talk to the witness and get the story of events.
News of the attack soon spreads.
I just came back from a friend's house. I couldn't get into the road. Loads of armed police, 2 ambulances. It was like a movie, like something you'd see out of a movie. To be honest, it was absolutely horrendous.
Police have launched a murder investigation after a woman was found dead at her home in Middlesbrough. Officers were called to a house on the avenue in Linthorpe at 8:20 on Monday evening. 34-year-old Jessica Patel, originally from the Leeds area, was found with serious injuries at an address in Linthorpe and was pronounced dead at the scene. Detectives are appealing to anyone who may have seen...
I got a call from my younger sister, and she just said to me that something's happened in Middlesbrough. So I asked her, I was like, you know, is everything okay? She says, I don't know, Dad's gone, we're just going to wait and see when Dad gets there what he says. So I said, okay, keep me updated. But when I woke up, I saw my husband sat at the end of our bed. I sort of sat up and I looked at him, and when I looked at him, I thought, something's not right. And he turned around to me and he just said to me, I've got no easy way to say this to you, but Jess passed away last night. I think those words in that instant hit me like a ton of bricks. My heart started racing a lot like it's racing now. Just thinking of that moment. I didn't want to believe him. That can't be true. You know, how could this just suddenly have happened? I remember calling Dad, and Dad's confirming that it was true. Something had happened, a burglar had got in, and Jessica had been harmed in the process, and that she'd been killed.
After receiving the devastating news, Jessica's family immediately rally round and make their way to the family home to support her husband, Mitesh.
I walked into their main living room where Mitesh was sat on the sofa, and I went straight over to him, sat down next to him, and he buried his head into my shoulder and was crying. I consoled him and just hugged him and told him that no matter what, we were there to support him. I myself was crying. The whole room, to be honest, was crying. Everyone was upset.
News of Jessica's murder sends shockwaves through the village.
I can't really know that. How can a murder happen in this beautiful place? It's a Linthorpe village area, everyone's friendly, and, you know, all of a sudden you actually hear, right, that she's been killed. And you think, you know, how can somebody do that, especially to a chemist, a pharmacist person who's actually, you know, there to help here.
How it happened to beautiful Jessica, you know, and she was so lovely, and you can't even imagine how someone can kill her. It's a fear. It's a lot. I no words, really.
It felt like there was a serial killer at large, and you wondered if they were going to do it again.
With such a big story breaking in the close-knit village community, local journalist Felicity Collinson is hot on the case from the off.
I went out to the scene and the street was just like really quiet, you know. It was quite like an eerie quietness that morning. Cordon had now been moved to just around the house. It was just covering the driveway. There was forensics in white suits walking in and out of the house, carrying cases in and brown envelopes, evidence bags. There was CSI vans, uniformed police officers on guard. I started to knock on neighbours' doors to try and find out what had happened.
With Mitesh too distraught to speak, it was left to neighbours to speculate what had happened. Had someone targeted this young, successful couple out of jealousy?
A lot of people have been saying that there's been a burglary in the house.
Obviously, they look like a wealthy couple because they have quite a wealthy house, you know, and obviously having the pharmacy and everything. Someone who knew them, possibly, had, you know, took a chance to burgle them, maybe thought she had money, maybe jewellery, and that's where it was, and she was just in the wrong place, the wrong time.
We check our doors, even windows, and make sure, put alarm on, put everything on to go out, and we don't let our kids go.
I was absolutely terrified, thinking, what if somebody got in my house? What if that happened to me? You know, I've got children. I was absolutely terrified.
Was it somebody who thought that the couple had money with them having the pharmacy? You know, did they have a safe in there where they kept the take-ins? You know, could somebody have broken in for that? Or was it somebody who needed or wanted drugs and believed that they may have kept drugs in the house? Or was it a big mistake that they'd got the wrong house?
While a grieving Mitesh stays with the family, police take a closer look at the crime scene. And one thing jumps out immediately. There's no sign of a forced entry. Meaning one thing, Jessica knew her attacker.
If there's no sign of forced entry, it looks like they've got in through an open door, which suggests that the victim would know them and allow them in. Everybody is a suspect till they're eliminated, without exception. So what we've now got to try and do is eliminate those who couldn't have been there at the time.
With no sign of a break-in, everyone known to Jessica is under suspicion. Could husband Mitesh offer clues as to who his wife may have let in the house?
The neighbour said she opens the door far too easily, far too quickly.
Neighbours saying about her being very nice, very trusting, too trusting, would allow anybody in the house without checking their identity. And therefore we'd have to look at that, because if there's no forced entry, we will be worried about somebody who's just been let in the house. Does she have a relationship with another man or another person?
Police need to identify a timeline of events in order to pinpoint when the killer gained access to the house. So they turn to Mitesh for help.
You'll want to know where he was, what time he went, because the timeline, when he left and when he came home, is significant. Because you need to be looking at perhaps other houses and CCTVs.
Mitesh explains to police that after going to the gym, he had gone out to get pizza at his usual takeaway, before returning home to discover his wife's body.
The husband of the victim seemed like he was a pleasant, kind of like quiet type of guy, wasn't he? He'd just do his work. He'd come, he'd order his food, you know, go home like everybody else.
The pizza parlour's CCTV helps police create an exact timeline of the evening and when Jessica was left alone.
The police came in to the shop and kind of like asked for the camera footage of the husband of the victim, and basically kind of explained what was going on in a small way. They didn't really tell us exactly what was going on, but they just kind of gave us a clue to why they need, you know, and what's happened.
He took my camera, CCTV camera, he took it from here. He said, I want to see what's going to happen in here, like when he came, when he go out, that's it.
With Mitesh's movements that evening clear, police are still no closer to establishing who had gained access to their home. But post-mortem results help police identify the cause of death. Could this lead to clues as to her attacker?
It's found that she died from pressure to her neck. There was also suggestion that from marks to Jessica's neck that a ligature of some sort had been used.
And in asphyxiation, of course, you've got to look at was something placed over a mouth, over a nose. Was there some other way of stopping the oxygen getting to her? All those sort of things you expect the examiner to tell you about.
Despite this crucial information, no murder weapon is found at the scene. 3 days into the investigation, and police are no closer to a motive or a suspect.
Police hadn't arrested anybody. I know personally I felt a bit of worry for the people living in that street. You know, I would have felt worried.
But on the 17th of May 2018, things take a dramatic turn.
A man has been arrested in connection with the murder of a woman in Middlesbrough.
Everyone was talking about it, that they've caught somebody.
When we find out who the police have arrested, it's just tragic, just a tragedy.
In the pretty village of Linthorpe, the close-knit community has been coming to terms with the murder of local pharmacist Jessica Patel. In the days since, Jessica's family rally around a grieving Mitesh.
On Thursday morning, we proceeded to Mitesh's house again, just to lend support. I spent the morning there, but then Dad received a call from the liaison officers asking us if we could return home because they needed to speak with us.
They didn't really tell me what it was for, but something related which I thought they may want some more statements. We come home, we sat in that room, and there's the police, the family liaison officers, and they said, Mr. Patel, we have to tell you this. It's Mitesh. And we're arresting him. And I says, hang on, what did you say? And they repeated it, where I says, look, have you got it right? And they said yes. They assured me that it's him, and as we speak, we're arresting him.
Having just spent the morning comforting Mitesh, his arrest comes as a shock to Jessica's family.
You can't help but think that why would he do it? You know, what reason could he possibly have for having to murder Jessica? At the same time, you're like, have you got the right person? Because if you haven't, that person's getting away.
Yesterday afternoon, police arrested a 37-year-old man in the West Yorkshire police area on suspicion of murder following the death of 34-year-old Jessica Patel in Middlesbrough on Monday. The man remains in police custody.
News of Mitesh's arrest becomes public and locals react in horror. How could this loving husband and pillar of the community have anything to do with such a brutal killing?
It was a bit of a shock, to be honest with you, because we thought of them as, you know, good people, normal people. We didn't think anything was going on in their home.
We were all just so shocked, gobsmacked, really. We're still thinking, is this really a husband who's been, you know, arrested for her murder? You know, he's a pharmacist, she's a pharmacist. You just don't expect this at all.
So what had led to the arrest of Jessica's seemingly besotted husband? The man she'd been looking forward to starting a family with.
The police are still searching the house, you know, for evidence and clues. And then there's a breakthrough.
So senior crime officers find a hard drive wrapped in clothing underneath the mattress. It has a serial number on it which relates to the CCTV in the house.
When police had previously spoken to Mitesh, there had been no mention of this CCTV. Surely the first thing that you would do, or one of the first things you would do if your wife had been murdered, is think, oh, we've got CCTV. The footage of the killer will be on our CCTV. But there was no mention of this at all from Mitesh.
Police examined the CCTV footage from the hard drive.
It shows that it was switched off or taken or removed 6 minutes before he called the police for the 909 call.
Police rewind the footage to look for any clues earlier in the day. But what they find shocks them. The CCTV shows that at 3:30 p.m, Mitesh returned home from the gym, but never left to get pizza before Jessica came home from work at 7 p.m. Instead, Mitesh doesn't leave the house till 7:42 p.m. and then returns home with the pizza at 8:15 p.m. 4 minutes later, the camera is switched off.
This is a crucial piece of evidence because it doesn't show any other person entering or leaving the house other than Jessica and Mitesh. You know, there's no other, you know, intruder or person sneaking around.
Mitesh calls police at 8:24 p.m. to report finding his wife dead. With no sign of anyone else coming to the house, police hone in on their now #1 suspect.
So now he becomes the prime suspect. We now need to look at what's the motive. So you'll extend the investigation, and you'll also start looking now at all his personal life and personal technology he has. Has he got an app on his phone? What does his computer say?
And the family computer drops a bombshell discovery.
There was searches on his computer, you know, how to kill my wife.
His searches included employing overdoses of insulin, employing perhaps strangulation.
We've also got searches on his laptop and on his phone about the fact that he will earn £2 million in insurance payouts from his wife's death.
Have police finally uncovered a motive for Jessica's murder?
These were various policies that were taken out at various times. It's interesting to note that the first policy was taken out shortly after Mitesh Patel had begun in 2013 to investigate ways to kill.
But the biggest breakthrough comes when police look at Mitesh's mobile phone, which recorded his heart rate and activity.
Mitesh Patel was not to know that he had this particular app activated on his phone. It tracks not only his steps, but also if he's done any staircases.
The app reveals to detectives that immediately after Mitesh had arrived back at the house, at a time when he said he discovered Jessica's body, he had also gone upstairs for 4 minutes before calling 999.
There was no reason, no innocent reason, for him to have done that if he was coming home to find his wife's body on the floor, just to the right of the front door.
So what had gone on that fateful day? And what was the truth behind their seemingly loving relationship?
The 14th of May seemed to have begun like most other days. It's right that Mitesh went to work early that morning. Jessica got into work herself an hour or two later. The day continued as other days. Because he'd worked the morning shift, Mitesh Patel left work. He was due to go to the gym at lunchtime, and then he went home. He spent the rest of the afternoon in the family home, and he was there when Jessica got home from work. Of course, he was to lie to the police about that, but he was there when she got home from work, shortly after 7.
Detectives established Jessica was killed soon after arriving home. And before Mitesh left the house to get pizza 42 minutes later.
After he'd murdered his wife, he left the house. He then went to the pizza parlor just down the road and ordered a takeaway.
He looked like he was on edge or there was something wrong with him, but we didn't take any notice.
He returned to the family home. He's got to have dismantled the CCTV footage, gone upstairs, hidden it, then come downstairs and then made the call.
It's emergency.
I think we've been burgled and my wife's been attacked.
Confident they have their man, Cleveland police make the decision to charge Mitesh for the murder of Jessica.
To be honest with you, after all that and how I was feeling, and for this to happen, you won't believe, obviously, what we went through.
Having portrayed himself as the devoted husband, running a successful business with his wife and planning to start a family together. The truth behind this perfectly cultured facade was starting to unravel.
When Jessica got married to Mitesh, I think she thought that she was going to have this lovely life with this great guy who'd bought her presents and supported her through her mother's illness. But then the cracks started to show early on in the marriage.
One of the things that she found difficult was that there was not a great deal, if any, sexual activity between her and her husband.
Desperate to start a family, Jessica sought IVF treatment as an alternative way to have children. But this took a destructive toll on her well-being and the couple's relationship.
She was injecting herself in the stomach with steroids and all sorts, and at the time she ended up on antidepressants. She became such an anxious person. Mitesh would quite often blackmail her by telling her that he would leave her and their relationship would be over if she was unwilling to carry on with going through the rounds of IVF. And I think for her, that relationship falling apart would mean her dreams falling apart.
Soon enough, Mitesh's dark side was to reveal itself.
Not long after they were married, Jessica's grandfather gets ill. And in his final days, she wants to obviously spend time with her family and her grandfather. Mitesh wouldn't let her do this. And there's reports that in the car one day, she's sort of like trying to put her case for wanting to go and see her grandfather, and he doesn't want her to, and he apparently hits her. She told a family member that he put his hands around her neck and that it hurt. A pharmacy worker had seen Jessica limping, and apparently Mitesh had thrown a mobile phone at her.
And as time went on, she became not just less bubbly, but more withdrawn and even losing weight. And we all came to understand that which Jessica's family suspected, that she was being controlled and kept apart from her own blood family.
But what could have led this once happy marriage to end in tragedy? Why did Mitesh want to keep Jessica apart from her family? And why did he end her life in such a violent way? 37-year-old pharmacist Mitesh Patel has been charged with the murder of his wife Jessica in their home in the village of Linthorpe. Having pleaded not guilty, the case is sent for trial.
To be honest, we can't believe that he had the audacity to plead not guilty when there was all of this evidence against him. It was just bizarre that he would even try to, get off with this.
In December 2018, the trial begins at Teesside Crown Court.
Well, in my life, I had never gone to a court before, never ever been in a court. We knew it was coming. To be honest with you, I didn't want to be there.
For the first time since his arrest, Jessica's family comes face to face with her alleged killer.
There was a couple of times that he had the opportunity to make eye contact with the family. There was clearly no compassion in him for the fact that he had lost his wife so horrendously. He didn't at any point scream his innocence. I don't think I could ever recall him saying, "It wasn't me, it was somebody else."
The prosecution reveals how Mitesh first appeared to police.
When he was first seen by the police, it was noticed that he had scratch marks down his neck. He was in due course to explain those away as having been as a result of his session at the gym that lunchtime. Well, that was clearly not the case. Further work by the forensic scientists were to reveal that underneath the fingertips of Jessica Patel was his DNA, particularly on the right hand, and she was right-handed. So the picture began to be built up of a struggle in which Jess had fought with her attacker, and clearly that attacker was her husband, whom she had scratched down the front of his neck.
Police have never revealed what they believe to have been the murder weapon until now.
It's found that she died from pressure to her neck. At the scene in the house was a Tesco carrier bag, and tests showed that the inside of the bag had traces of Jessica's saliva and blood in there. There was also suggestion that from marks to Jessica's neck that a ligature of some sort had been used. So it was surmised that the Tesco carrier bag had been used to suffocate Jessica.
After suffocating her, the court is told Mitesh bound her with duct tape. Crucially for the prosecution case, a reel of duct tape was discovered in the pharmacy, with police believing Mitesh hid it after going to order pizza on the night of the murder.
The jury were given both pieces to look at. They were photographed, and once the tape had been flattened, it was the clearest possible fit, just like a jigsaw puzzle. It was unique.
I was present at the court every single day. I think 95% of what came out in that courtroom we were unprepared for. There was only 5% of that we went in knowing, and that 95% was devastating. To learn what Jessica had gone through, how she had died, what he had subjected her to all those years, it was just devastating.
But the biggest shock was yet to reveal itself in the courtroom. Far from the perfect life they had portrayed to the world, it seems Jessica was harboring a secret about her husband.
Jessica found evidence on her husband's phone of the gay flings he was having and of pornography. He insisted it's banter. He insisted he loved her more than anyone. And if she wanted, he would give up seeing anyone else. He said all he wanted was her and to have their baby.
He had extramarital affairs with men. He was a regular user of the gay app Grindr. He was caught in clinches with another man in the pharmacy, which was recorded on the pharmacy tapes.
But it soon became clear to the courtroom that Mitesh had already found another love abroad.
Messages were found on his phone from a lover in Australia who he wanted to set up another life with.
In 2011 December, on the Grindr app, he met a guy called Amit Patel.
So was Mitesh's dreams for a new life the motive behind the callous murder?
Mitesh cunningly plotted to remove Jessica from the equation. He basically wanted Jessica out of the way so that he could move on and start this new life in Australia with his apparent soulmate.
But not only did Mitesh have a secret lover who he planned to move to Australia to be with, he had an even bigger plan. Mitesh wanted to bring up a child with his new lover. The child he should have been bringing up with Jessica from the frozen IVF embryo.
I still can't believe that somebody could go down to that sort of level. He wanted to take this embryo with him to Australia. That was his plan.
After a grueling 12-day trial at Teesside Crown Court, the jury returns its verdict. Mitesh is found guilty of Jessica Patel's murder. He is sentenced to 30 years in prison.
When the judge passed the sentence of 30 years, again, his expression, I watched him the whole time, his expression was blank. Nothing at all. And he was gone in an instant, taken away in an instant.
With Mitesh now behind bars, Jessica's family is slowly coming to terms with life without her.
She was a fantastic older sister to the rest of us. I'm always going to have so many fond memories of growing up with Jess. It's just so unfortunate now that I have another memory that's so tainted. I always can't help but picture her lying there on that floor in that living room, fighting for her life. And I always think of that moment because I can only think that she must have thought of us in that moment, knowing that her life was fleeing away from her, and how desperately she must have thought, someone save me, knowing it was her husband that was doing this to her. I can't shake that moment from my head at all. It's just there forever to stay. I wish it would go away, but it just doesn't.
I want to be strong, and I want to be living the way I used to, even though I know that it's not possible, but I want to be strong. This is the worst thing that could happen on this planet, and it's happened to me and to this family. I do not want this to happen to nobody.
Even to this day, every day, and every time I think of her, there's a part of me that feels so much guilt inside of me that I couldn't do anything to affect a change. I didn't notice what was going on, but obviously there's no going back. There's no changing or undoing what's happened. But you've still got to live every day with that guilt inside of you and somehow reason with it as well.